AMD's new iGPUs are coming to handhelds finally. AMD is actually losing to Intel in desktop, and the RTX 4070 is getting worse. Let's get into the hot news, everybody. I'm your Brett host. We're gonna be going over the hottest tech news that I can find on the internet while you enjoy your breakfast this Tuesday, August 13th, 2024. And we're gonna start off today talking about the newly unveiled GPD Pocket 4. This is the first Ryzen AI 300 Strix Point gaming handheld that has been announced. This thing is supposed to have the 890M, the AI HX 370, which has 12 cores and a bunch of extra threads, as well as be ultra portable, 144 hertz high refresh rate, 8.8-inch screen. We're going to talk about this in a little bit, but we currently are actually working on a full video where we're going to compare the 880M and the 890M. You might remember Kyler did a video on the 890M, which you can check out right up there, but suffice it to say, seeing that in a handheld form factor is going to be pretty impressive. So get subscribed in case you want to see us do those benchmarks. But with the Pocket 4, the HX 370 is going to have a TDP between 20 and 28 watts, up to 64 gigs of RAM, as well as up to 8 terabytes of storage, with the launch configurations being up to 4 terabytes. It's also going to feature SD card reading, as well as a full Ethernet jack, as well as a bunch of other ports that are going to make this a very capable system, and also including eGPU support with a twistable display. The only downside that I can see right at this moment, number one, it's not out right now. That makes me very sad. It's only going to come out in October. But number two, the battery life is only going to be 44.8 watt hours, which means this is not going to have great, exceptional battery life, especially with the form factor that they chose of the clamshell. They could have beefed it up to give it an extra battery, but they're choosing not to. No specific release date or pricing has been mentioned as of yet, but they have released some comparative benchmarks showing the 890M on the GPD Duo, showing that it beats out the RTX 2050 mobile, as well as everything that Intel and AMD have released previously. As mentioned, we will have our own video on this coming soon, but those numbers do appear to be accurate. The 890M absolutely puts up some really good numbers, especially once you give it that high TDP, which again just makes me very excited for Strix Halo when that eventually comes out. But this is also one of the reasons why we're not getting low-end GPUs anymore. The integrated GPUs that we're finding that AMD and hopefully Intel comes out with Lunar Lake are quite capable. And that's made it so that the GPU manufacturers don't make as much profit or have as much market share when it comes to the low-end cards. And recently there was a rumor that the RX 7300 and 7400 were supposed to be getting an imminent release, but now reports are coming out that AMD is just deciding not to go with that and instead is going to be focused on the RX 8000 series launch with RDNA 4. So it looks like the 7400 and 7300 may not see the light of day. Again, these are preliminary rumors, but it does seem to go along with current market trends that it's just not worth it to release the low-end stuff, especially when GPUs that are being integrated and can run at 20 to 28 watts are so dang good, like something that's on the Ally X, especially once you give it enough RAM to share between the CPU and the GPU. These things can be quite capable. And I also think that of Reece. I think he's quite capable at saving you money.
Yo, welcome back to UFD Deals, bringing the hottest tech deals out on the internet. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Hope you guys have had a good start to your week. And hey, look at that. We've got some deals for you today. Starting off with this Samsung 990 EVO NVMe M.2 SSD. You can pick up the 1TB version for a very nice price of $69.99, making it $80 off. But then next up, we have the ASRock B760M Pro RS LJ 1700 motherboard, going for only $99.99, making it $60 off. And then lastly, we have this Asus VivoBook 14-inch 1080p laptop featuring an Intel Core i3 1215U, 8 gigs of DDR4 RAM, and 128 gig SSD, available for only $209.99, making it $220 off. And hey, with that, the deals are done. You can find these and more linked in the video description down below. But until next time, I hand you off back to Brett for the rest of your hot news. Cheers.
Well, Reece, there's a deal going on in the CPU world between AMD and Intel, especially with Intel's instability that's been cropping up. You would think that maybe they had lost some market share, but it turns out, at least according to one research report from Mercury Research, Intel's actually beating AMD in the client desktop sector. So everything that traditionally gamers and people who use desktop PCs are going to interact with, Intel is gaining, whereas AMD is losing. However, AMD is winning in the area where you get the highest profit margins and the biggest amount of money coming in, and that is servers. AMD's server business growing significantly year on year, and then also dominating in market share compared to Intel. But in the client PC market, Intel's currently at nearly 80% of the market share, where AMD is holding on to roughly 21%. Obviously, they just launched Ryzen 9000. That likely won't bolster their market share too much, especially because one of the main reasons Intel has such a good foothold in the client business is not because of the 14900KS and all of the things that are actually having the instability issues, but it's the things like the 14100, the 13400, the 13500, the things that AMD has really ignored when it comes to launching these product segments in their recent launches. We still don't have a Ryzen 3 out of Zen 4, and it's allowed Intel to continue to have good market share in that. On the mobile CPU side, AMD is gaining. They're up to 20% of the market share, which is 1% higher than the previous quarter and roughly 4% higher than a year ago. But over on the server side, AMD has taken another 0.5% from Intel, making it so that they have 24.1% of the market, which again is where a lot of the money is, and it's probably where AMD is going to need to continue to reign in order to keep things going. So even if Ryzen 9000 is middling according to a lot of consumers, as long as Zen 5 puts up significantly fast numbers when it comes to releasing their EPYC or Threadripper Pro chips, AMD is not going to really be too concerned at the end of the day. But I personally am concerned of when we're going to get Nvidia into this whole thing. There's been reports that Mediatek and Nvidia are supposed to be partnering up for either AI PCs or the handhelds, and just trying to get Team Green in this small form factor, more highly competitive ARM space. And reports are coming out that that first AI PC will likely be launching sometime in the first half of 2025. Whether that means that Nvidia is going to have an announcement at CES and then release later sometime in Q2, or potentially they might hold on to it for their own event with GTC, which happens sometime in the March timeframe, announcing it there and then again releasing in Q2, lines up quite nicely with how Nvidia tends to do things throughout the year. And this is not how Nvidia tends to do things. Releasing a stripped down version of one of the most popular cards out on the market, the RTX 4070, is officially launching as a slower card. Galax putting out their first RTX 4070, the OC2X GPU, that now has slower VRAM than the original 4070 that launched. This now comes with GDDR6 memory instead of the 6X, and it comes in at 20 gigabits per second as opposed to the 21 gigabits per second that happened in the launch variety and that you can find in all of the higher end RTX 40 series cards. So this likely won't lead to a ton of lower benchmarks out there, but the main reason that this is happening is because there's a GDDR6X shortage that's happening over in China and various other parts of the world that's making it so that there's a supply constraint. And instead of just discontinuing the 4070 until these supply issues alleviate themselves, Nvidia is opting to just release it slightly slower. So just keep your eyes out if you're in the market for an RTX 4070. Is it the 6 or the 6X variant? Because that 5% on the memory side might mean that you get slightly slower FPS, slightly, just a little bit. And I'm gonna go through a little bit of your comments from yesterday's episode of Hot News. Starting off over on Floatplane, we got Kryptonite saying, Battle Mage, let's go. If you are able to add SteamOS to a ROG review, that would be incredible. I agree. I'm waiting for that to happen. I just filmed our review of the Ally X, and as I'm using it, I just keep thinking to myself, wow, this would be better with SteamOS on it. Windows is the worst part of this handheld, because the Ally X is great. You'll have to wait for our full review, but they solved a lot of problems that the original Ally had, but they still haven't solved the Microsoft problem. And then we got PX4XKKRWMM saying, I wonder if the GDDR6X shortage was related to those double VRAM cards. As in, did whoever is making those cards buy out a large portion of the available GDDR6X, causing shortage for the rest of the Chinese market? In any case, interesting combination of events. I didn't think about that. it is a possibility. This is the first that we're really hearing of these double VRAM cards, so I don't know how many have been sold, but the shortage is likely happening due to production reasons, but then also consumption reasons of people wanting these 20 gigabyte VRAM cards that AMD and Nvidia are releasing for the large language model. So it actually might be pushing higher constraint on the market because people are going for the higher amounts. It's likely. And then over on YouTube, we got Liber saying, Gabe Newell said years ago after leaving Microsoft that one day he would create a replacement for Windows. The dream is reality. Not yet. We're close. We're inching ever so closer. And then Ciota saying, the UFD tech staff locked him in a closet. I'm not locked in here, I leave, I promise. And then we had a lot of comments yesterday where we're talking about SteamOS, and a lot of people were like, well, there's already this one version of Linux that as long as you configure this one file, you can get it to be close to like how SteamOS operates. And the point is that the thing that is good about SteamOS is how little you have to do with it. That's why it's a successful Linux variant. Regardless of whether or not you can turn just Arch Linux into SteamOS, that is not what the average consumer is going to do. If I pick up this at Best Buy and it's running SteamOS, that's what I want to happen. Little configuration on my end for maximum gaming engagement. That is what I want to happen. And then also in yesterday's comments, we talked about the AMD CPU vulnerability. I tried to cover it as objectively as I could. I think it's a bad idea for AMD to just say, these CPUs are outside of our support window. But at the same time, like the vulnerability isn't really super urgent to fix for a lot of people because it requires kernel level access, but that didn't stop people in the comments like Rukus saying, oh gee, the AMD vulnerability requires physical access. Make a big banner for that, please. It's almost like Intel is paying people to throw negative mud at AMD while they're on their way down. Typical Intel stuff. I literally said that in the video. I discussed that. I still think it's a bad customer relations move to say the CPU we launched 5 years ago is outside of our customer support window, so we're not even gonna bother. I think that's a bad move, even if it's technically true. It just doesn't bolster consumer confidence in them. But then at the same token, while we got somebody saying that I'm being paid by Intel to attack AMD, we had somebody else saying Intel is focused on the fab market, AMD fanboy. Which one am I? And that's not the only one that was there. I got called an AMD fanboy for not being harsh on them in yesterday's episode of Hot News. So I'm being attacked from one side for just saying it requires kernel level access. The only real problem here is that it continues after operating system reinstalls. So it's a bit more nefarious than typical malware vulnerabilities. But then on the other side, the people are calling me soft and saying that freaking AMD's paying me and Intel's paying me. I guess I'm winning if everybody's upset because I'm right down the middle here. I don't know, man. I don't know. But I'm gonna stick with Kuiper Active's advice, even if I might partially disagree with it, saying Windows is fine. Calm down, gang. I'm gonna calm down and I'm gonna be done with this episode of Hot News. We'll be back with more of the hottest tech news for you tomorrow, my friends.